Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Six Elementals Interviews. This is my last interview for March, but what a way to end off the month. I am so honored today. For me, it's 8 p.m. At night here in Canada on the East Coast, and where my wonderful guest is, it's approximately 11 a.m., I believe, in the morning. So thank you so much for joining me. And today I have the amazing author of, and she'll have to forgive me because I don't yet have the new version, but I have to hold up my copy. This is an amazing book, a book that when this book was entered in the self-published fantasy blog off, Mark Lawrence's premier contest in the indie sphere, I was fortunate enough to be a judge during that contest, and I was really fortunate to have this book fall into my bracket. And of course, I definitely pushed to have it advanced semifinals because it was spectacular. It's definitely in my top 50 to 100 indie fantasy books, period. One day I'll have to do a ranking of that, but marvelous book, fantastic author. And as I said, today we have the wonderful Sarah K. BALSTRUP. How are you, Sarah? Thanks for coming.
I'm very well. Thank you for having me on the show. So it's not only 11 a.m., it's actually Monday. So I'm way in the future.
Yeah, definitely in the future. It's Sunday night here. So thank you so much for joining me today. I can't wait to talk about your writing and your writing journey. I feel really compelled because, as I said, I absolutely love this book. To kind of dive in to speaking about this directly. So, but in terms of broaching that subject, this book, one of the things I absolutely love about this book is the subject matter and the themes. And in this book, you deal with religion and faith in some really unique and fascinating ways. And my understanding is that you have a background in religious studies. So I'm just curious if you can tell us a bit about your background there and how it relates to your writing.
Yes. So I actually have always been interested in religious symbolism, I suppose. So even as a child, like my mum, she's one of these sort of spiritual seeker types. So one day she'd be into, you know, the I Ching, and then next week she'd be into runes or flower readings or whatever it may be. And so I had this kind of really comprehensive exposure to a lot of different religious, you know, surface level communities. And we would go to the Hare Krishna temple just to have a meal, and then she'd want to take me to a church, and then so I wouldn't say I ever was a part of any of those religious communities, but did sort of open my mind up to the different ways that people kind of think about the sacred and organize their lives, and different types of rituals, and especially different spaces where people come together to practice religion. So anyway, I in high school I was very much into visual arts, and I did a lot of painting. And when I went to university, I wanted to do the same thing, but I really didn't like the way that people had to sort of pitch themselves. I'm an artist that explores blah blah blah, and my work is, it's all very conceptual. It didn't feel very authentic to me. And of course, as a teenager, 18, you don't really have this strong sense of who you are and what you want to say anyway. So I kind of dumped that. And then when I went back to university as a mature age student, I started off with art history and English and all this sort of thing. And then I discovered the religious studies department. So I was still investigating, religious stories. I was still looking at, the way religious concepts sort of pop up in the visual arts and in stories, literature, all that sort of thing. But it was through this sort of religious lens. So um, people who kind of assume that I'm Christian because I've used the word unity, or that I've actually studied theology. It's like quite different to that. So, my thesis, for instance, I wrote about, psychedelic / mystical experiences that people have when they're watching certain films like 2001 A Space Odyssey. And yeah, so completely just not what you would expect. And so when I decided to write a novel, I really wanted to incorporate a lot of these bits and pieces that I'd found to be quite interesting from my studies, and also just to explore some more difficult themes using that sort of inspiration. So there's a lot in there. I know that my writing style, I tend to pack in a lot of you know there's a lot in one page, basically, and when you make it epic, it's a lot for people to engage with. So I think that I really appreciate the readers that have taken the time to really concentrate and like stay the distance with my books. So yeah, anyway, that's
Well,
my beginnings.
that's fascinating, and I must say, because for one, your prose is so outstanding. It's that great vehicle into your work, in that if people, I mean, a lot of my fellow authors and readers and people in the community, they're into these, mammoth epic fantasy books, with many of them with very dense prose and packed with themes, lots of nuances and layers upon layers of intricacy and world building, and your book has all that. But I have to say, for me, and you know how much I love your work, your prose makes that accessible through just a beautiful, evocative writing. So I think you are, as a reader, you're just so engaged that you're absorbing all this complexity, right, through the vehicle of your prose, and it's just outstanding. So, but I am surprised, though, now that you've clarified, exactly with your background, because I my thought process, without knowing all this, was that here's someone who is extremely well educated, specifically in this field, especially in religion, and religious studies. The way you handle so many with such, it's very adroit, it's very adept, skilled, the way you handle the themes, and it just really, it just blew me away. And I think the like, looking back in hindsight now that I read the book, I read that book I think it was 2023. That I read the book. Now, time flies. It's 2025. So but yeah, like there are a lot of other themes, psychosis and revenge and mysticism and trauma and torture, murder. Like, there's a lot packed into your books, as you said. But I thought, for me, and because I'm so drawn to it, the religious intolerance, the bigotry, the oppression, the religious fanaticism, and the revolutionary stuff, that was the stuff that really got to me. And I think that is really, really compelling for me. But before I delve back into that, I want to go back to your background, your evolution, your writing journey. So what compelled you? So you talked about your mother and her willingness and openness to embrace different faiths and etc. Like, so if I can ask, and I want to get too personal here, what about yourself? Like, how do you see yourself in terms of, faith, and how that defined this book? And how does that tie into what made you want to write a book like this?
So I would say, like, when I was in early high school, so like 14, 15, I developed chronic fatigue, and it went for about 4 years, where, no matter how long I would sleep, I would just never feel rested. And if you've ever had a period of sleeplessness, even for like a week, you just start to feel completely like off the planet. So, my short-term memory was terrible. But at the same time, I would kind of have this really intense relationship with, you know, art, music, that kind of thing. And I think that, you know, because my mum kind of framed things in spiritual terms, that I really saw that illness that the doctors couldn't help me with whatsoever.
Yeah.
There's not much known about it. Like, you know, there's no real cure for it. So I kind of had to treat it as a, I suppose, slightly like spiritual psychological problem that I needed to reflect on, you know, myself, and um, how to make myself better, basically. So I used to do a lot of writing in my journal, and thinking about things from different angles, and trying to sort of understand, like, why this was happening to me. And then
Yeah.
suddenly it all sort of went away when I was about 19. And but I'd already kind of established this, you know, relationship with art and writing as being this way of kind of delving into, um, you know, spiritual things, but also just like personal psychological
Yes. Yes.
problems. You know what I mean? So, um, yeah. So I suppose there are certain concepts that I gravitate towards, but because I'm not within a religious tradition, it's, you know, some people would not consider, you know, my approach to be religious, but at the
Yes.
same time, um, I have a great respect for people who grow up in a religious faith, and have that structure around them. But um, you know, like, I do think prayer is important. I think, you know, moral concerns are of great importance. You know, there's a lot of things that once you throw out religion, you know, and you cobble together um, the functions that religion once held,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
like, you know, some things fall apart. And I suppose
Yeah.
that's one of the
Yeah.
themes that I was exploring in The Way of Unity in particular. So in the first book in the series. So a lot of the research that I've done, like, focuses on this kind of like the romantic era. So,
Yeah.
you know, where people have kind of lost faith in the church as a human institution, and they're, you know, looking to other sources of
Yes. Yes.
spiritual truth. And, you know, and then that kind of has a revival in the 60s through all these sort of you know, new religious movements, and, you know, hippie culture,
Yeah.
and all this sort of visual arts stuff that's still going today, still has roots going back in that direction. I kind of, so I have a lot of respect for those, for people who take these sort of sincere journeys. So when I was starting to write The Way of Unity, and I wanted to create a religion that was sort of unique, I was looking through Carl Jung's The Red Book, which is,
Yeah.
yeah, and just the images. So
Yes.
not really taking on his concepts necessarily, but I just love that he created that, you know,
Yeah.
that he sort of sat down and said, I'm going to create an illuminated manuscript of,
Yes.
and yeah, I think that people who go on these sort of quests to find their personal connection that's quite authentic with, um, you know, with religion, I just have a lot of respect for it, and I think it's important. And I know it's not for everyone, but for me, I think it's sort of essential in my life. So you know, the religious concept that I explore in The Way of Unity, you know, is definitely a dark side to religion,
Oh
and
yeah.
there's a, you know, and there's also a sense of sorrow that things have disappeared that were once, you know, good. And yeah, so it's not this like blind you know, kind of glorifying of religion. Like, there's definitely, yeah, I mean, some may say the dark parts overpower the rest in that book, but I hope not. I hope people can still see the, yeah, the positive in there.
Well, absolutely. I know I did, and I know for me, largely because I think there's a commonality that we share in terms of our fascination, perhaps with religion. What I would specifically characterize as religion versus faith, and
Yeah.
religion as a human made construct around a belief or a faith and a relationship with a deity or deities, and that's more of a personal relationship, like between yourself and who and what you worship, versus organized religion, which I feel, and I talk about this a lot, and this is one of the reasons why one of the things that I write about a lot, and I saw that commonality in your work, and that was of course it drew me right to it, because as you allude to, like organized religion has been this force for morality and good, centuries. I also believe humankind might have destroyed themselves were not for various, organized religions as essentially a guiding, a moral code and things like that. However, there was always a downside. There was persecution, intolerance for other religions, depending on which religion we're talking about, and of course, corruption, because unfortunately, anything that is human made is subject to corruption because we're flawed human beings. So, as much as, so many selfless, incredible people, we're helping to steer humankind through religion and this force for good. Essentially, there was that downside of the corruption, the persecution, and the taking advantage of others, and so many horrific things done in the name of a faith, whereas really the religious leaders were driving those horrible things, and people associate with the religion. So I find that whole theme just utterly fascinating, right? Like that is something that just and I think it very much today we're still grappling with questions surrounding faith versus religion, and in a world that a lot of people believe is increasingly secular and increasingly non-religious and non-faith based, but yet there's still so many people that are drawn and devout in their faiths or their non-faiths, the atheism, agnosticism, but I think what I absolutely love, though, the way of unity is, I mean, and again, I'd love to hear, you clarify this as the author, one who wrote it. I read The Way of Unity, and some of the questions that I felt you were raising for me as a reader, and I know reading is very subjective, is, like, questions like, what constitutes true faith? How does one know who and what, whether you're worshiping the right faith? Is something wrong? Is a faith wrong because it seems harsh or barbaric to the eyes of someone else? Could it be a lack of enlightenment, an understanding of what the god or gods require from those who worship them? There's, and again, you do talk very much, you do speak to the more malevolent side, in that in your book, you're people who believe or don't believe, what they do to others who don't feel the same, is tough. So so I know I threw a lot in there, but I'm just wondering, were those some of the purposeful themes that you wrote into your book, and how did you want to approach those sort of things?
Yeah, look, I think I wanted to create a society that was geographically small enough to only have one religion. And I have the religion starting in a mysterious way. So it's like you have this original, mystical vision that a character called Scarlin Karasek receives. And then it says, and time began and everybody was, we have these 7 clans and everyone was happy and there was no more war. So it's sort of, I've left that that part of the history deliberately, oversimplified to kind of, demonstrate that there is this tension when you have historians looking at, say, a historical period, and people have been obsessed, of course, with the life of Jesus for forever. And you have this historical perspective and trying to sort of say this happened or that happened, and trying to build this picture of Jesus the man. And then you have the mystical function of this person within the religious tradition. And all you can do to make them one in the same is to simplify those original moments. And I read R. Scott Baker's, I'm still reading his amazing series. I'm up to the Padlock Warrior, but the second book, what's it called? I forgot.
I've only read the first one. Can't wait to read the second one. Yes, but in overall,
anyway, it'll come to me. But I mean, he's clearly looking at similar themes, like looking at how this person goes from being a child to, being a man, and then, having this absolutely monumental influence over an entire society. And so they're the kind of origins that are sitting behind it. But by the time we get to the story of the Way of Unity, this religion's been practiced for 700 years. You've got, a developed priestly class, but the difference with this priestly class is that they are all mystics. So all of them are in this priestly class by virtue of the fact that they go into trances, they receive visions, they record these visions, and together they interpret these visions. And it's all very kind of, I wanted to have that tension of like whose vision is really true in this context, and like how do they kind of work together to have this constant connection with the sacred, essentially. So not just saying, okay, we have these teachings and this original story, like how is this maintained and how is this kept alive? And so the sacred in this story is, it's kind of a psychic force. People access it through smoking a certain herb. And it's different states of consciousness. People can't just logically access this God. It has to be people in a certain state of mind. And so that's why a lot of the book is focusing on different states of mind, like along a scale. And the character who essentially brings the priestly class to its end, she's driven by absolute fear. She's completely, terrified about the psychic power that is out there, and she wants to basically protect herself. And so she tries to apply this to her whole society, because she, I wanted to sort of also capture the danger of initiation. I think in fantasy there's this tendency for people to kind of treat the process of initiation as like, oh, I've achieved stage 1, stage 2, I'm a big wizard now. And there's none of the real sense of it actually being able to go wrong, or or even just being unsure of whether or not the process has happened as it should. So she's full of those doubts because her father was partially initiated and then something went wrong. So it's and I try and I have that sort of unreliable I don't know if it's unreliable narrator, but I have doubt from different levels. So you never actually know what the actual truth is. It's just people's best interpretation and best guess at what is real. So that's constantly evolving with all the characters, and same in book 2.
And I absolutely love that aspect. I love the ambiguity surrounding the religions in the book. I love the main character who is, as you said, driven by fear. In some cases, I believe driven by revenge, driven by as you said, a desire to self-protection, and a genuine belief that she's doing the right thing to protect the elements of society that she feels need to be protected from. I guess the best way to describe it is the enemy religion. And I mean, so much of what I love about the way of unity, as I said, with this topic of religion, is that there is, and again, separating religion from faith, and I want to make that clear distinction. And again, certainly we're not here to criticize any religion. We both, I think, respect, as you noted, respect all religions, all faiths. We're just, these are all discussion topics here. And you mentioned the dark. What I'm getting to is you mentioned the dark side, and there's some very dark things that happen in this book, in the Way of Unity, regarding religion, in that specifically with this pervasive influence of the intercessors, right? These mystics, that they worship the gods, but they demand essentially religious purity, and then they're going to secure they would demand faith and adherence to the dogma with these blood rites, right?
Yeah.
And what happens if you're not, if you succumb to sinful thoughts, and things like that. Like it was just, I mean, it was fantastic and so well done. But I quickly, sorry, before I get back to the question, I want to quickly acknowledge Go Read Books. Hey, thanks so much for coming by. And notes, as a pastor, I enjoyed this conversation. So that's fantastic. I really appreciate that. We hope you enjoyed this one.
Warrior Prophet. That's it.
Yes, thank you for supporting that. We did the Warrior Prophet, the book 2 in the, I guess, the overall Second Apocalypse and book. But I think it did 7 books or 6 books. I think maybe 7, but the first trilogy, I think, is Prince of Nothing, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and then the first book is Darkness Comes Before, which I've read, which I cannot wait to continue that series. Another series I really have to get back to because I absolutely love it. But I'm kind of parsing my big series I did my last end this year, and
it's quite intense. It's I have a big break between each installment. But yeah, he's such an amazing writer.
Yes, brilliant, absolutely brilliant writer, a brilliant Canadian writer, and he is. I mean, from what I've seen of that series, it's going to challenge me in the best ways. But as my friend Philip Chase says, I think it's going to be a series that I'm going to be glad I read, but I may feel a bit slimy reading some of the, some of the themes. It's just there's a lot of nihilism. It's not. I guess overall the outlook is not terribly optimistic, right?
It's yeah. I mean, sometimes the characters feel like they're literally in hell. Like it sometimes feels like it is set in hell. So it's not, it's not bright and uplifting, but it's very intellectually I don't know, it's just intricate. It's completely fascinating. And yeah, it's very dark. I wouldn't listen to it, without headphones on, like in the car or something like that. But it's I do like writers that push these boundaries and I mean, within reason. I don't like reading things that are completely horrific. I can't read most horror, but there's a touch of horror in my writing, but I try not to ever be gratuitous about it or to push things for no reason. So yeah, the second book, I mean, basically I decided to write The Way of Unity as a standalone book. I wasn't going to write anything else with that world. And then a few people said, you've done all this world building, you should probably write a second book. So I had this second book in mind, and as the ideas developed, I realized it was way bigger than 2 books. So the second book that I've written, Black Stream, it continues straight on after The Way of Unity with the same characters, but I've sort of shifted some of the points of view to some of the minor characters who will, continue on in the third book. But as I'm trying to write the third book, I realized I have to sort out this origin story that I was mentioning. So it could become a prequel. I don't know. It might just be a writing exercise, but I've been looking at, Scarlin's life and trying to imagine what all these places were like and the different clans like before this religion started. So it's proving to be just as big as as the first book with the complexity, but I'm still unsure about the order of how I'll do this. It's hard when you have geographical complexity, point of view complexity, and then you add time complexity. So I'm not sure if I want to really do that to readers. I might separate that prequel out to just be a standalone. But yeah, it's very much in its early stages.
Well, I cannot wait to read that. As I said, I plan to read everything you write. But I think, the one thing that I felt reading The Way of Unity, I felt that there was, and obviously you did such a phenomenal job with the world building. It was so immersive. There's so many features that this isn't, I feel you made this really gritty, realistic world. And the religion and the magic system, that was for me, that was a focus, especially with the meridians, right? With this band that people wear in their forehead and with the stones and that emotionally distance the person who's wearing it, and it blunts their emotional extremity and perception, right? And it prevents them from having their thoughts invaded and from hostile magic. I just thought it was fantastic, but I definitely felt, especially with this story, there was still a lot more to come, right? Although it felt as a complete, you didn't necessarily live it on a cliffhanger. The book felt complete, but I felt there was a lot more story that you certainly you could write a long series about, involving this fascinating world and these amazing, morally great characters that were compelling and troubled and but really, really intriguing.
Yeah, Sibylla, who ends up being the main character, when I was first sketching out the novel, she was just a villain that lived on the mainland, and I didn't really I thought, oh yeah, she's done all this horrible stuff and that's like happened in the past and now we're, and then I thought, well, I don't want to write a cardboard cutout villain. And then I got so into her story that it just ended up being her story. So she's not particularly likable, and I for some reason felt stubbornly connected to that. So I have a lot of other viewpoints and other characters that explore different approaches to things. So I feel like I balance it out that way. Yeah, but I do like people to be genuinely to have actual flaws that may not necessarily be easily resolved.
Yeah, and I absolutely love. I'm one of those, I guess, weird readers that I have no necessity for the characters to be likable for me to latch onto them. I love reading flawed, morally great characters, complex characters, characters with lots of depth, as you write, Sibylla, and the other characters in the book. It's always nice to have a really goody two shoes, character, kind of syrupy character, that you can root for, but I tend to really gravitate towards the messy plot. That's what I write, right? So I'm naturally drawn to that. And I would say I agree. Like, unlike someone like R. Scott Baker, another brilliant writer, his. So from what I've read so far, and you're farther on the series than I am, his book is so nihilistic and so like, absence of free will, like what's the point? Like it just of life, like that kind of, I didn't feel that at all reading your book. Just that the world that these characters were thrust in was very complicated, and there was this clash of politics versus religion versus all these things mixed up in between, and opposing sides that didn't share each other's views, and were very entrenched in their lens, and feeling that the ends justified the means, no matter what. Like they're people who like their actions appear good to their followers supporters while appearing horrible to their enemies, right? And it made the reader hard to root for the characters. But I think for me as a reader, what you did such an immaculate job of is that you really understand their motivations, right? And you really like they're fretting over the consequences to the greater good in their mind, and they're worrying about future generations. But you see they're doing these what would seem to be horrible things, but you really do a great job of illustrating the whys, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
And I definitely find like I remember being in a religious studies lecture, and my our chair of department, who I'm very, very fond of, she said, now you all need to take this far more seriously, because nobody believes something that doesn't make sense to them. Like talking about all these kind of like weird cults and things, you know, some of them are just parody. Some of them are made up nonsense that no one actually, is invested in. But there are many belief systems that, you actually have to take a minute to readjust and recalibrate to understand why, how these things function. And, I kind of had the intercessors. I mean, they're obsessed with mystical states. They have this function to purify and sort of emotionally recalibrate the people in their care, but they're not fundamentally oriented towards the people in their care. They're oriented towards understanding this divine mystery, and so their behavior at a certain key point um, can seem very, very weird. That they because their goals are completely different. I don't want to kind of give too many spoilers, but basically their um their relationship to the body, to human life, like all of this stuff is completely different, because all of their training has made them spirit oriented primarily. And I kind of treat that as a little bit of an imbalance. So there are certain characters that have really good traits, but to an imbalanced level, even those can be bad. And Zohar, she's a character who is generally quite nice and da da da, but she's also just a little bit, she's not quite the strong, like she doesn't have these big moments that make her the strong kick-ass hero. She still has, like, she still gets upset about things. She's still just a young girl, um with all the foibles that come with that. So I wanted to have you know characters that are sort of vulnerable as well, and not quite up to the task of being fantasy heroes, because um it's like I've got to write the type of fantasy that means something to me. And there's not a lot of battle going on. I basically have tried to make it very psychological, individual, things that, like, focusing down to that level. So in the second book there's a little bit more violence, I suppose, but it's not the huge, battlefield kind of stuff, just because that, there's enough of that out there, and people do it amazingly well. I enjoy reading it, but that's not my story to write. So
And it was so well done too. Like, I mean, and I feel like it wasn't necessary. It wasn't part of,
mm,
what your book was about. It was still fantastic without that sort of thing. It's not a book about dragons and elves and the
no.
more traditional fantasy type monsters and but it is there is hostile magic and
Mm,
it's really, like I said, it's really really well done. The complexity, the relevance of the themes you explore, the way you handle those themes, you bring out that strong emotional reaction out of readers the same way reading a thrilling battle scenes where your favorite character might die, or it's the same kind of things that you evoke in the readers. So I just thought it was fantastic. And you did that. And I think one of the things again, I enjoyed, so much about your book, but I really, one theme that I really spoke to me was that, that religion and faith, it's something so deep in our psyche potentially, and that, we are obsessed in some ways with it, and that if one religion or faith is cast down, something else is going to rise in its place to
mm,
replace that, because we need that, right? We
yeah,
seem to
yeah,
need that as a society, as a human race. We seem to need that.
mm,
But even though we need it, like we seem unable to have it function without, for the most part, these organizations built around it that
mm.
makes the whole clash just start all over again, right? That with religion and politics butting up against it, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's this thing where you have someone who can quest into the unknown and sort of discover these truths that they bring back to their community, but then that person already has like sort of inferred power or
yeah,
more um ability to speak on certain things, and you get this sort of imbalance, even in the smallest of groups, like once you start, yeah, and like with like when I was looking at like religion formation and things like that in some of my studies, it's kind of like it gets to a certain size and then someone says, I disagree with this, and then it splits, and then you have this new kind of outlier, um that is sort of causing trouble for the main thing, but then it can get so big that it is the new norm, and then there's another splinter, and then there's another splinter, and it's I kind of that organic process of religious change I wanted to capture as well, um, which is so hard in fantasy because you're asking people to learn, all these names, all these places,
yeah,
and then you like adding all these different levels in there. Um, so I did find with the second book that like I wrote a little short history introduction at the beginning, and I think it's needed in this context, and uh it's not like a crazy amount of stuff to think about because I try and keep the history quite short, and you don't have sort of warring cultures, you just have one society. So it is simplified in some terms, but yeah, sometimes like I start following an interesting idea and then I have to be like, okay, there's too many things here. Got to take that out. Yeah.
so how do you feel? We talked a bit about the way of unity. So you've written the second book, and is it out yet? Is the second book released
Yes,
yet?
it's out. It's out. I'm actually gonna stand up and go and grab the book.
Absolutely. Absolutely, would love to see that. You've also I have the original cover version, but you've also revamped.
Yes, so this is
Yes,
the new cover
oh, it's
of The
beautiful.
Way of Unity, and this is the sequel,
Oh, beautiful.
Blackstream. So yeah, I painted the covers for both of these and designed them myself because I just thought, you know, I can't explain what I want to anyone, so I'm just going to do it. And that's about self-publishing. You can just you know, do
Yeah.
whatever you feel like doing. And yeah, so the I've started to paint the cover for the final book, but now I've got
Wow.
this weird prequel idea. I'll have to do another cover, or I don't know. I've got to think about that. Yeah,
Well,
but
it's
the
gorgeous. I mean, you're just so talented that you can do that. That you can do your own covers. So a lot of people have to outsource that. So that's amazing. They are beautiful covers.
yeah, no, I'm quite happy with them, and I mean, Blackstream, it does rely on the first book a fair amount. I mean, the editor that I worked with for this book, he'd never read The Way of Unity. So he was able to follow it, but I still, after I'd finished working with him, I decided to do the, short history at the beginning just in case. Because, we all read so many books. You've got to kind of remind yourself who all the characters are and all that sort of thing. But um, yeah, we do see Sibylla again. Um, things have kind of gotten worse. The guard uh, gaining power, more power than they had before. And then you still have, these kind of escaped remnants of the old religion trying to restart things in various places. So it does continue with the story sort of almost straight off the back of the last one. So if someone read them back to back, they would, be able to follow everything that's going on. But it has been 2 years since I released the first book. So
Well, congratulations on the second book, and looking forward to reading that, and of course, getting to the third whenever that comes out. Um, are you someone who, and you may not be able to obviously divulge everything, but are you someone who feels you'll be writing many books in this universe? Will you be writing prequels, sequels after perhaps the main series is finished? Do you think you'll write more outside of this world? Like, do you have
yeah,
any?
I think that the world has more to give, but I'm considering ways to sort of have at least some parts of it standalone, because I think sometimes people just need an entry point and then they don't necessarily want to read a big long series. So um, potentially, if I do develop that prequel, it would be a standalone because it's in a different timeline and it doesn't rely on having read anything else. But I suppose I just have to see how long that story ends up being. It's definitely not a novella. It's like it's got a lot of stages that have to happen in that story. So that one, I will write it and then I'll see what I'll do with it. And then the final book, I've already written about 50,000 words of that one. It's just how much like, I hate it when characters sit around and talk about, in the past this happened and da 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 da. So I feel I need a more elegant way to introduce a lot of information. That might make the story grow quite a lot, or I might be able to solve some of these problems. But I've got my main characters, um, Calette, who is a character who technically was in the first book, but like only mentioned once or twice. She's featured a bit more prominently in second book. She's not a very nice character, but definitely is a main character in the third book. Um, and there are sea voyages, and moving out of the homeland. So I'm sure you can
Right?
imagine
No?
how complex that can be as soon as they start encountering other things and people. Yeah. So
Sounds amazing. Sounds incredible. Very exciting stuff, sir. Very exciting stuff. Yeah, like I said, I can't wait to get to it. I think the other thing is that how are you finding your overall author journey today? I neglected. I was remiss. I did want to ask you. So you decide to self-publish The Way of Unity. And you certainly met with a lot of critical success. The SPFBO semi-finalist tag, the Killer Nashville Clayton Award for your finalist there. So I mean, clearly your writing's very well respected. So how have you found? You got a great reviews from Kirkus, etc. Like, so how are you finding your writing journey overall? I know there's, as an indie, there's all such a balance between sales and marketing and writing and like.
Look, I'll put it this way. I wrote an academic book based on my PhD thesis that was published by Bloomsbury Academic. And for me, that was like great achievement.
Yeah.
But I've sold more of my of my self-published novel than I ever did of that. So pretty much I'm always interested in things that are a little bit obscure, like some of the bands I like are, they only put out a certain amount of copies of their album. Like I have accepted long ago that I'm not a mass market type author. But finding those unique people who really like what I'm doing is quite difficult, especially when you're just tweeting, occasionally, because I don't like going on about my books. I have to kind of force myself to do like a post a week or something like that. So it's, I don't really enjoy the marketing part of it very much, but I do enjoy the fact that through the online writing community, I've found so many other authors that not only do they like my work, but like I love their books. And I mean, my list of books that I want to read by self-published authors is growing and growing, but I'm sadly so far behind. So it's just like I really value being a part of that community and connecting with the small amount of people that get it. So I'm not really the sales part. Like I'm so far from being profitable. It's just, not even a pipe dream basically. But, the feeling you get when another author or, a reader, actually connects with your book, like that's what it's for. So I try not to advertise to mass market, because like, through these sort of give your book away free on some random because these people that are just wanting to sit down like for a couple of hours and have an escapist read, they're not going to understand what I'm talking about. So I need people to kind of at least have the level of interest to commit to the book. So it's, I figure if I ever write a book that's suitable for marketing to a wider audience, this stuff will be in my back catalog, and I would have done it exactly the way I wanted to do it. So that's sort of how I think about it. But I'm certainly not going to stop writing. It's
That's good.
central to my life. And like I do have a day job and I've got young kids, and like I don't have enough time to write, but at the same time, you tick along and before you know it, there's a book and it's published, and somehow it happened. So
and I totally agree with you. I think writing for yourself, writing not necessarily to be a best-selling author, though I'm sure most of us would love that to happen in terms of best-selling to the level of, it's all comparative, right? Some people sell very well but aren't satisfied with their sales, and I think everybody would want to sell more. but at the same time, yeah, writing for, the love of writing, for the craft, for the people that generally I think what happens, especially in the indie game, you tend to just be really happy and grateful for what audience you have, as big or small as that is. And that's what you want. You want those people who understand and get your book and are drawn to it and want to keep reading your work. That, not for so much for the commercialism of the whole thing, just, but interesting, because you've mentioned that in, I presume, in the nonfiction side, you've been traditionally published. So was there a thought process with, if I can ask, with the Way of Unity to get an agent? I mean, presumably, even though
I went through that whole because I actually, I just published my PhD, through Bloomsbury, and my son had just been born, and we just moved to a different city, and we were in lockdown. And I was like, I am going to go completely insane if I don't have a big project to work on. I need something that can hold my brain together. And, I needed something creative. So I just was clicking around, and I found this online novel writing course, and it was a year long. And it basically said, at the end of this course, we guarantee that you would have written a novel. And I was like, all right, that's a good, good structure and motivation. So, yeah, I did that novel writing course through a group called Retreat West. So Amanda Saint runs that. She's a lovely person. She does mostly flash fiction stuff. So she's not really, there's not a lot of fantasy stuff that goes through her course, but I had a mentor, and we'd sort of meet up, and I'd have to submit things, on certain days, and it kept me motivated, and it kept me feeling like, okay, I can do this. I've done enough this month. I'm going to get it done. But the scariest thing was, at the very end of it, I had to pitch my just furiously finished manuscript to a publisher that I really respect, and it was just terrifying because I wasn't ready. It was cool to meet him, but anyway, so I sort of went and polished it some more, and did all the letter writing practice that one must do, and getting everything together, and I pitched it. But as I was looking up agents, I just kept thinking, I don't think I have anything in common with this person. All of their taste is so far from what I'm into. I should not feel offended that they're not, gelling with me, because I don't feel I'm gelling with them from the very beginning. So, and with Australian agents, there's basically nobody around, especially for fantasy. So, to succeed in Australia, you really have to write Australiana. So you have to write things set in Australia, something that has some sort of marketable political tone. Just all this stuff that just kills the creativity for me. And with the big agents overseas, they wouldn't be able to make money out of you. And I can see how hard it's been for me to get my marketing going, and trying to sort of find taglines for my book and all this sort of thing that, it's given me a bit of a reality check as to, not everything that you write is for the market. But you can still value those other projects that, are for a smaller audience. And just sort of differentiating that, not really taking it as a kind of thing that I try that I'll never do again. It's just, it's not like this particular fantasy series. So I'll need a whole lot more time to finish this other book that I'm working on very slowly in the background that might be marketable, but it'll be a few years before I'll be able to finish that one. So I won't say too much more about it.
Okay, well, still exciting stuff. And again, I think we all know that books sometimes take a while to take off. You never know where, you might have a project that you don't think, okay, well, I wrote it for me, and I might have a very small audience, but then suddenly something happens, and it goes viral, it takes off, and there's just no telling where your books will go once they're out in the wild, once you publish them, and in a way they almost no longer belong to you anymore. That readers will potentially gravitate towards them and just grab hold. So, but all I know is that you definitely have a fan in me, in your writing, and I can't wait to read Blackstream and anything else you're going to write. As I said, fantastic book, Way of Unity. If people, those of you who like dark fantasy, compelling themes, great characterization, this is a book you really want to sink your teeth into, in a series and an author that I think you're gonna absolutely love. So, as I said, I'm a big fan. And I know you have some fantastic reviews, on Goodreads from people that I respect eminently in their taste. So I think you have a lot to be proud of with the way of Unity in your series. So, but I was going. The time just keeps flying. Like, it's been an hour sitting here talking. And you've been so generous with your time. I don't want to monopolize it. However, as we're winding down, I do want to give you the opportunity to, provide for people. Where can they buy your books? Where can they, you're very kind and accessible, in terms of, social media, where to follow you. Can you provide us with some of those details?
So I'm on Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky, but not really. So I have a profile. I don't really understand Blue Sky. I haven't found my place over there, but I do exist over there for people who are there only. I have a newsletter that I really commit to only sending like 4 emails a year. So it's an occasional newsletter, but I do put in, the best books that I've read in that time, and like I try and make it of value to people. So you can find me. I mean, if you can spell my surname, you can find me. Like my surname is fairly unusual, which is why I keep it. And it's, I've got a website. I've got you can. Everything is all sort of there with all the links if you can find the website. So and if people are interested in looking at the short history of Valspar that is included in the beginning of Blackstream, I've got a PDF of that on my website, so people can read that in advance if they want. And I'd say even if they wanted to read it while reading The Way of Unity, I mean, if they're there may be some spoilers in there, but they're high-level spoilers. So I don't know if it will ruin the experience, but definitely, if people have read The Way of Unity a while ago and want to refresh their mind, it's a good idea to look at that one.
Okay, fantastic. I will do it more or less. I mean, I feel that, relatively speaking, The Way of Unity is still very fresh in my mind because it was a book that made a huge impact on me. But I think just because of for interest sake, when I get to the Blackstream, I will go to your website prior to that and delve into this, because I'm a history lord, nerd, and geek that way. That I absolutely love that stuff, and I love the world building, of course, in The Way of Unity. So that's something that's really up my alley. So I'm definitely going to indulge there and do that. So thank you for letting us know about that. I also want to thank everyone who came by in the chat. Anyone who's going to watch this on replay, you're what makes this type of long form content awesome. It's something that I love doing because I get to sit down and chat to fabulous people such as Sarah. And it's been such an honor and a pleasure to have her come by. I want to quickly, for me, plstewart.com is the website where you buy the books. 4 books out in the Drowned Kingdom saga right now, the 5th one coming up shortly. Pack of Wolves in the spring, hopefully in the next week or 2, 3, but somewhere soon. Also, so a bit of shameless self-promotion. I'm part of the Shapers of World anthology with some wonderful authors. This edition is compiled by the awesome Ed Wood. He's an award-winning podcaster and an author himself. He selects authors that he interviews on his podcast every year to be part of an anthology. I was very blessed to be asked to do this. The caliber of writing is very high. I'm not necessarily saying mine, but there's some fantastic authors there. My story in here, The Forest Dark, is linked to my John Kingdom universe. It's set in a time long before the events of the main series. But in any case, coming out March 25th. So if you're looking if you like anthologies, you like short stories, I think there's something here for everyone. Science fiction, fantasy, of course, some brilliant stories in here, by some very talented authors. And of course, if you read their John Kingdom stuff, you're interested in just seeing me write something short. My first time was hard. I found the short writing a lot harder than writing these voluminous, big books in the John King saga. But Shaver's World Volume 5 coming out this week. I encourage you, if you like anthologies and a lot of good short stories, to check it out. Otherwise, find me on Six Elementals, interviewing fantastic people such as Sarah on my channel, and also beside my brilliant partner, Taylor from Maybe Between the Pages, another wonderful blogger. Check out her channel. And we do the page chewing interview series, whereas Six Elementals concentrate more on the indie sphere. Page chewing is very broad in terms of everybody that we have on there. And finally, on the blogging side, Before We Go blog, led by the wonderful Beth Tabler. Shout out to Beth and the whole Before We Go blog crew, where I'm an assistant editor at Before We Go blog. So you can find my reviews there and on Goodreads, including my review of The Way of Unity, Sarah's book, on Goodreads and on Before We Go blog. And again, just a fantastic book that has made a huge impression on me, and I was so happy and privileged that Sarah granted me the honor of an interview. So that's it's really, really special. So thank you for doing that. And like I said, big fan, and I plan to read everything you write. So
Thank
sorry.
you so much for having me on the show, and I am looking forward to reading your work as well. I'm just a book that I wanted to read, I put in my TBR. I figured out 2 years ago. I've just started, so that's how far behind I am. But I'm catching up. So
oh well, I'm honored. I mean, not a requirement, obviously. I mean, it's there. I mean, I'm 5 books into a 7-book series, so maybe by the time you get there, in a couple of years, the series will be finished. So if you end up liking it, then you don't have to wait. You can read as many of the series as you like. So, but thank you for that. Thank you for that. So for everyone, good night, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Thanks so much for joining me on Six Elemental Interviews and my incredible guest, the author Sarah K. BALSTRUP, author of the SPFBO semi-finalist Way of Unity. Check this out. Again, dark fantasy, great characters, compelling themes. This is a book, if in the indie sphere, you're definitely going to want to check out. So thanks very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day, evening, night, wherever you are, and we will